I'm Katherine, 58, and nothing prepared me for finding my son Thomas huddled under a bridge, cradling my 4-year-old granddaughter Lily. Their clothes were filthy, faces gaunt with hunger. That same morning, my phone had pinged with Instagram notifications from my daughter-in-law Audrey, cocktails on Bondi Beach, designer shopping sprees in Sydney. The rage that surged through me as I connected these two realities would ignite a battle that would change our family forever. Before I begin this painful story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to fight for family when someone tried to destroy them. Trust me. What happened next will show you exactly how far a mother will go when her children are betrayed. My life had been marked by loss and resilience long before this chapter began. When my husband David died suddenly from a heart attack 15 years ago, I was left to raise our son Thomas alone. I poured everything into being both mother and father to him, ensuring he had every opportunity despite our loss. We grew closer through those difficult years, and I watched with pride as he blossomed into a kind, intelligent young man with a promising future. Thomas met Audrey during his sophomore year at college. She was everything a mother could want for her son: beautiful, articulate, and seemingly devoted to Thomas. Their romance moved quickly, and I remember feeling a mixture of joy and that particular bittersweetness that mothers feel when their children find partners. Thomas was clearly head over heels, and I was happy for him, even if I sometimes felt the slight pang of being replaced as the most important person in his life. When they married after graduation, I helped plan the wedding, embracing Audrey as the daughter I never had. Thomas had access to a trust fund his grandfather had set up, which would provide a solid foundation for their life together. I hadn't worried about Audrey gaining access to these funds through marriage. Why would I? She seemed to genuinely love my son. Their little family became complete when Lily was born 4 years ago. I'd never seen Thomas happier than when he held his daughter for the first time. I threw myself into being the doting grandmother, babysitting whenever needed, and showering my precious granddaughter with love. From the outside, they seemed like the perfect American family. Thomas working his way up at a marketing firm, Audrey balancing motherhood with freelance graphic design work, and little Lily growing into a bright, curious toddler. But perfection is often just a carefully constructed illusion. Looking back, the warning signs were there, though at the time they seemed like minor concerns rather than red flags. Audrey's shopping bags grew more numerous, her tastes more expensive. Designer clothes, high-end furniture, luxury cars. Her spending seemed excessive, even for their comfortable income. When I gently inquired about their finances during a private moment with Thomas, he assured me they were doing fine, though a flicker of something worry crossed his face before his smile returned. I also noticed how Audrey would subtly control Thomas. She would interrupt him mid-sentence, make decisions without consulting him, and sometimes speak to him with a condescending tone that made me wince. If I visited unannounced, she would be visibly irritated, and soon Thomas began insisting I call before coming over, something he had never required before. Perhaps most concerning was Thomas's gradual isolation from his friends and even from me. Weekly dinners became monthly, then sporadic. His college friends stopped coming around. When we did get together, Thomas seemed subdued, his natural exuberance dimmed. Audrey always had a plausible explanation: work stress, Lily's busy schedule, renovation fatigue. Lily, too, began to show subtle changes. Always a robust, energetic child, she started looking tired at family gatherings, her clothes hanging a bit loose on her small frame. When I brought treats, she would eat ravenously, as though she hadn't had a proper meal in a while. Once, I noticed bruises on her arms, which Audrey quickly explained away as typical toddler clumsiness. I tried to speak with Thomas privately about my concerns during a rare moment when Audrey was occupied elsewhere. "Is everything really okay, Thomas? You know you can tell me anything, right?" His response was defensive, almost rehearsed. "Mom, everything's fine. Audrey is under a lot of pressure with her work, and we're just busy. Stop looking for problems where there aren't any." The last normal family dinner we had was 3 months ago. Audrey announced over dessert that she had a fantastic opportunity, a business trip to Australia to work with a major client. It would mean at least a month away, but the pay would be substantial, and it could lead to more international work. Thomas nodded supportively, but wouldn't meet my eyes. When Audrey left the room to take a call, I noticed his hands trembling slightly as he cleared the dishes. At the time, I attributed it to concern about managing without his wife for a month. How terribly wrong I was. As they left that evening, I hugged Thomas a bit longer than usual, feeling an inexplicable urge to protect him. "Call me if you need anything while Audrey's away," I said. He nodded quickly, but it was Audrey who responded. "He'll be fine, Katherine. Thomas isn't helpless." Her tone was light, but her eyes were cold. That was the last time I would see them together in their facade of family happiness. The first week after Audrey left for Australia, communication with Thomas was normal, a few texts, a brief call with Lily where she excitedly showed me her drawings over video chat. The second week, my messages started going unanswered for days. By the third week, I was calling daily, with no response. My texts to Thomas showed as delivered but unread. Calls went straight to voicemail. The knot of worry in my stomach grew tighter with each passing day. "Thomas, it's Mom again. Please call me back. I'm getting worried." I left my 20th voicemail, trying to keep the panic from my voice. When another day passed without response, I decided to take action. First, I called Thomas's office, asking to speak with him about a family matter. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Reynolds, but Thomas no longer works here," the receptionist said hesitantly. "What do you mean? Since when?" My voice rose with alarm. "I believe it's been about 4 months now," I thought. "I assumed you knew." 4 months. My son had been unemployed for 4 months and hadn't told me. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet as I thanked her and hung up. Next, I drove to their apartment across town. The building was in an upscale area, with manicured grounds and a doorman. I'd always thought it was slightly beyond what they should be spending on housing, but Audrey had insisted they deserved it. "I'm here to see my son, Thomas Reynolds," I told the doorman. His expression changed immediately. "Ma'am, the Reynolds family moved out almost 3 weeks ago." My heart pounded. "Moved out? Where did they go?" He looked uncomfortable. "I'm not supposed to discuss residents' situations, but since your family—" "They were evicted, ma'am. There had been notices for months." "I'm sorry. Evicted." The word hit me like a physical blow. I leaned against the desk for support. "Can I speak to the property manager?" "Please. It's urgent." The property manager was reluctant to share details but confirmed what the doorman had said. Thomas, Audrey, and Lily had been evicted after 6 months of missed rent. 6 months. Their belongings had been placed in storage temporarily, but most had been claimed by a woman matching Audrey's description before she left the country. "What about my son and granddaughter? Did they go with her?" The manager shook his head. "No, ma'am, just the woman. She had the paperwork showing she was authorized to collect their things. Haven't seen the gentleman or the little girl since the eviction." I spent the rest of the day driving around the city, checking hotels, calling hospitals, even visiting homeless shelters. No one had seen them. By evening, I went to the police station to file a missing persons report, only to be told that since Thomas was an adult who had likely left voluntarily, and since the child was with her father, there wasn't much they could do. "It sounds like a family matter, ma'am," the officer said gently. "Maybe he's just embarrassed about his situation and needs some time." I barely slept that night, or the nights that followed. I printed flyers with their pictures and distributed them around the city. I called Thomas's old friends, former colleagues, anyone who might have information. No one had heard from him in months. It was as if my son and granddaughter had vanished. For a week, I searched tirelessly. I took time off work, barely ate, hardly slept. I checked social media compulsively. But while Audrey's Instagram continued to showcase her glamorous Australian adventure, Thomas's accounts had been dormant for months. Then came the breakthrough I'd been praying for, though it came in the most heartbreaking form. I was distributing flyers near a public park when a homeless man approached me. "That little girl," he said, pointing to Lily's picture on the flyer. "I've seen her. Pretty little thing, always holding her daddy's hand." My heart leaped. "Where? Where did you see them?" "Under the Jefferson Street Bridge." Got themselves a little spot. Man keeps to himself. Takes good care of the kid, though. Shares whatever food he gets with her first. I pressed $20 into his hand and rushed to my car. The Jefferson Street Bridge spanned a dry riverbed at the edge of town. It was a known gathering place for the homeless, a place I'd driven past countless times without a second thought. Now it might be where my son and granddaughter were struggling to survive. The scene beneath the bridge was like something from a different world. Makeshift shelters constructed from tarps and cardboard. People huddled around small fires in metal drums. The smell of unwashed bodies and desperation hung in the air. I moved through the camp, showing Thomas's picture, asking if anyone had seen him. Several people nodded toward the far end of the bridge, and there they were. Thomas sat on a flattened cardboard box, Lily curled up against his chest, both of them thin and dirty, their clothes ragged. A small pile of possessions, a backpack, a tattered blanket, a child-stuffed rabbit missing an ear lay beside them. Thomas was whispering something to Lily, stroking her hair, trying to comfort her, though he looked utterly defeated himself. "Thomas," I called softly, afraid of frightening them. His head jerked up, eyes widening with shock, and then immediately filling with shame. He couldn't meet my gaze, turning his face away as though trying to disappear. "Grandma!" Lily's recognition broke the terrible silence. She struggled to her feet and ran to me, her little arms wrapping around my legs. I knelt and embraced her, feeling her bones through her dirty dress, smelling the sickness on her breath. "Mom," Thomas finally said, his voice cracked and hollow. "How did you find us?" I couldn't answer through my tears, could only hold my arms out to him. For a moment he hesitated, as if unworthy of comfort. Then he stumbled forward and collapsed against me, his body shaking with silent sobs. In that moment, beneath a grimy highway overpass, surrounded by the forgotten members of society, I made a silent vow. I would find out exactly how my family had ended up here, and whoever was responsible would pay. The drive back to my house was silent, except for Lily's occasional coughing from the back seat. Thomas stared out the window, his profile sharp with malnutrition, his shoulders hunched with shame. When I reached over to squeeze his hand, his fingers were ice cold despite the warm spring day. "We'll be home soon," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Everything's going to be okay now." He didn't respond, but his fingers tightened around mine for a brief moment. At home, I ran a bath for Lily while Thomas stood awkwardly in my living room, looking out of place in his own childhood home. When I returned, he was staring at a family photo from happier times, Thomas's college graduation, with Audrey beaming at his side. "She took everything," he whispered, not turning around. I guided him to the kitchen, heated soup, and made sandwiches. He ate mechanically, without enjoyment, but finished everything. After we got Lily settled in the guest room, exhaustion finally claiming her, we sat at the kitchen table, the ticking of the clock loud in the silence between us. "Lily has an ear infection," I said gently. "I'm taking her to the doctor first thing tomorrow." Thomas nodded, his eyes filling with tears. "I tried, Mom. I tried to take care of her. I begged for work anywhere that would hire me. I did odd jobs for food. I gave her everything I could get." "I know you did," I said, fighting to keep my own emotions in check. "But Thomas, I need to understand what happened. All of it." He took a deep breath, and the story poured out of him, a confession of shame, manipulation, and systematic abuse that had been hidden behind closed doors for years. "It had started small," he explained. "Audrey had always been impulsive with money, but after Lily was born, something changed. She began gambling online, small amounts at first that gradually increased. When Thomas discovered the extent of it and confronted her, she turned it around on him, accusing him of controlling her, of not trusting her. She was so good at making me doubt myself," Thomas said, his voice hollow. "She'd spend thousands in a weekend, then convince me I was overreacting when I got upset. She'd say I was being paranoid, that I was the one with problems. The emotional abuse escalated alongside the financial destruction. Audrey would belittle Thomas in private, then present a perfect image to the world. She'd threaten to take Lily away if he didn't comply with her demands. She'd alternate between explosive anger and tearful apologies, keeping him perpetually off balance. I started having panic attacks at work," he admitted. "I couldn't concentrate. Audrey would call constantly, show up unannounced to check on me. My performance suffered. I was put on probation, then let go 4 months ago. When he lost his job, Audrey's true nature emerged fully. She berated him constantly, calling him a failure, threatening to leave him. Thomas scrambled to find new work, but Audrey sabotaged his efforts, scheduling family emergencies during interviews or calling potential employers with concerns about his mental health. Meanwhile, she had been systematically draining their accounts. Thomas discovered she had taken cash advances on credit cards in his name, maxed out their joint cards, and somehow gained access to his trust fund, which should have been protected. Her cousin works at the bank that manages the trust, Thomas explained. I think he helped her forge documents. By the time I figured it out, 90% of the money was gone. When the eviction notices began, Thomas begged Audrey to scale back her spending to help him find solutions. Instead, she announced her business trip to Australia, a trip she had booked with their last significant chunk of money. She told me it was an investment in our future, Thomas said bitterly. That this client would solve all our problems. The day before she left, she emptied our checking account. She took her jewelry, her designer clothes, all of Lily's good toys. She said she'd send for us when she was settled. After Audrey left, Thomas and Lily managed in the apartment until the final eviction. He had sold his watch, his laptop, even his wedding ring for food. When they were finally forced out, they spent 2 nights in a motel before the money ran out completely. With nowhere left to go, they ended up under the bridge. I sold my phone for food last week, he finished, tears streaming down his face. That's why I couldn't call. I was too ashamed to come to you before that. I kept thinking I could fix it somehow, that I could protect Lily from knowing how bad things were. I failed her. I failed as a father. I moved around the table and held my son, this grown man who suddenly seemed as vulnerable as the boy he'd once been. You didn't fail, Thomas. You were abused emotionally, psychologically, financially. What Audrey did was calculated and cruel. While Thomas showered, I checked my own accounts and made some calls. The next morning confirmed what Thomas had told me his trust fund, which should have held over $1 million, had been decimated. Only about $100,000 remained, protected in a secondary account that Audrey hadn't discovered. Bank statements showed systematic withdrawals over the past 2 years, with large transfers to Australian banks in the months before Audrey's departure. I took Lily to my pediatrician, Dr. Winters, who confirmed not just the ear infection, but also malnutrition and anemia. As she wrote prescriptions, she asked gently about Lily's living situation. My son and granddaughter have been through a traumatic time, I explained carefully. They're living with me now. Her mother is no longer in the picture. Dr. Winters nodded, understanding in her eyes. Katherine, as a mandated reporter, I need to know if Lily has been neglected or abused. I took a deep breath. Her mother abandoned them after draining their finances. My son did everything he could to care for her, under impossible circumstances. They've been homeless. But Thomas never neglected her. He gave her whatever food they had, kept her as clean as possible, read to her using books from the public library. The neglect and abuse came from her mother, not her father. The doctor made notes in Lily's file. I believe you. And I can see that Lily is clearly bonded to her father. But there will need to be documentation of their situation for their protection. I'd recommend getting legal advice immediately. On the drive home, scrolling through my phone at a red light, I saw Audrey had posted another Instagram photo, this one showing her lounging on a yacht in Sydney Harbor, champagne glass in hand, captioned, "Living my best life." Some people just don't understand what it takes to get ahead. The rage that filled me in that moment was unlike anything I had ever experienced. This woman had systematically destroyed my son, endangered my granddaughter, and now she was flaunting her freedom while they suffered. She had not only abandoned them, she had left them to die slowly of hunger and exposure under a bridge. I made another vow then, with Lily sleeping in her car seat behind me. Audrey would not get away with this. She would face justice, no matter what it took. The next morning, while Thomas and Lily slept, I made a call to an old friend. Martin Geller had been my husband's college roommate and was now a private investigator specializing in financial crimes. I explained the situation, leaving nothing out. Katherine, this sounds like a classic case of predatory marriage followed by financial abuse, Martin said gravely. I've seen it before, though rarely this extreme. I'll need Thomas's permission to access his records, but I can start looking into Audrey's background immediately. Within 3 days, Martin had uncovered disturbing information. Audrey Williams had used at least 3 different identities over the past decade. Her real name was Audrey Blackwood, daughter of convicted fraudster Gerald Blackwood, who was currently serving time for a Ponzi scheme that had cost dozens of retirees their life savings. "There's a pattern here," Martin explained, spreading photographs across my dining room table while Thomas was upstairs helping Lily with her medication. "She's done this before. Twice." The photos showed Audrey with different hair colors, subtle changes to her appearance, but unmistakably the same woman. Marriage certificates, divorce filings, police reports, all told the same story. Audrey would target wealthy young men, isolate them from friends and family, drain their finances, and disappear. Neither of her previous husbands had pressed charges, too embarrassed by the public humiliation. "She's gotten better at it each time," Martin pointed out. "More thorough, more patient. With Thomas, she took years to set everything up, had a child to cement her position, and went after the trust fund systematically." "How did we miss this?" I asked, feeling sick. "How did I miss this? I should have protected him." Martin shook his head. "She's a professional, Katherine. She knows exactly how to present herself, how to manipulate not just her target but everyone around him, and she had family helping her." The mention of family led us to our next discovery. Audrey's parents, who had attended the wedding and visited occasionally, were actually her aunt and uncle. They had helped maintain her false identity, providing references and background when needed. When Martin and I visited them at their modest home in a nearby suburb, they were initially defensive but eventually admitted the truth. "Audrey had a rough childhood," her Aunt Barbara explained, "not meeting my eyes. Her father's crimes destroyed their family. Her mother couldn't cope, started drinking. Audrey learned to survive however she could." "That doesn't excuse what she's done," I said coldly. "My granddaughter was living under a bridge because of her. She nearly starved my son into oblivion." Barbara looked genuinely shocked. "Under a bridge? We didn't know it was that bad. She told us they had agreed to separate, that Thomas was staying with you while she pursued this career opportunity." Her husband, Richard, seemed more resigned than surprised. "We should have known better. The expensive gifts, the cash she always seemed to have. We didn't ask questions because we didn't want to know." They provided additional details about Audrey's past, her connections in Australia, and her pattern of behavior. While they expressed remorse about Thomas and Lily's situation, I left their home with little sympathy for them. They had been complicit, turning a blind eye to warning signs because they benefited from Audrey's schemes. Further investigation revealed the extent of Audrey's preparation for her escape. She had been transferring money to Australian accounts for over a year. She had established connections with wealthy circles in Sydney through online forums and social media. She had even consulted with a divorce attorney about custody options 6 months before leaving, though she clearly had no intention of pursuing a legal divorce when abandonment suited her purposes better. The most disturbing discovery came when Martin found documentation of Audrey's next planned steps. Notes in her cloud storage, accessed through Thomas's unwittingly shared family account, revealed she intended to wait several months, then file for emergency custody of Lily from abroad, claiming Thomas had become mentally unstable and abusive. "She's building a narrative on social media," Martin explained, showing us her carefully crafted posts. "Notice how she occasionally mentions being worried about her family back home or praying for better circumstances. She's laying groundwork to claim she's the concerned mother who had to leave a dangerous situation." Thomas, who had been quietly listening to these revelations, suddenly stood up and left the room. I found him in the backyard, staring blankly at the swing set where he had played as a child. "I can't believe I was so blind," he said without turning around. "I loved her, Mom. I trusted her completely. How could I not see what she really was?" I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Because you're a good person who assumes others are also good. She exploited that. It wasn't your fault." He turned to me then, and I saw something new in his eyes, a quiet determination replacing the shame that had been there since I found him under the bridge. "I want to fight back," he said firmly. "Not just for me, but for Lily. Audrey doesn't get to destroy our lives and then walk away. She doesn't get to come back later and take my daughter after what she's done." That night, after Thomas had gone to bed, Martin and I sat in my kitchen reviewing our options. The legal situation was complicated by international boundaries, but not impossible. Australia has extradition treaties with the US for certain financial crimes, Martin explained, and they take a dim view of parental abandonment. But we need to build an airtight case before we move. I nodded, a plan already forming in my mind. Then that's exactly what we'll do. Audrey thinks she's won. She thinks Thomas is too broken, too ashamed to fight back. She has no idea what's coming for her. Martin studied me for a moment, then smiled grimly. I've known you for 30 years, Katherine. I almost feel sorry for Audrey. Almost. I thought of my son and granddaughter sleeping upstairs, both still too thin, both still bearing the invisible scars of Audrey's cruelty. Don't waste your sympathy, I said. She certainly won't waste hers on us. The first weeks of Thomas and Lily's recovery were focused entirely on their physical health. Lily's ear infection cleared with antibiotics, but her malnutrition required careful monitoring and a special diet. Thomas, too, needed medical attention. He had developed pneumonia from the weeks of exposure, and blood tests revealed severe vitamin deficiencies. Beyond the physical healing, there were emotional wounds that ran far deeper. Thomas would wake up in the night, panicked that Lily wasn't safe. Lily had nightmares and would cry for her father, afraid he would disappear. I often found them both asleep in the guest room, Thomas sitting upright against the headboard, Lily curled against his chest, his arms protectively around her even in sleep. Dr. Peterson, the family therapist we began seeing, explained that both were experiencing trauma responses. Thomas is suffering from complex PTSD from the years of emotional abuse, she told me during a private consultation. And Lily, despite her young age, has been affected by the instability and fear. Children are remarkably perceptive. She knew things were wrong long before they became homeless. I became Lily's temporary legal guardian, with Thomas's blessing. This was a protective measure recommended by our newly hired family attorney, Rebecca Chen, who specialized in cases involving parental abandonment and financial abuse. If Audrey attempts to claim custody from abroad, having a stable guardianship already established will work in our favor, Rebecca explained. It shows the court that Thomas recognized his limitations during his recovery and made responsible arrangements for Lily's care. Thomas initially struggled with this decision, seeing it as an admission of failure as a parent. Dr. Peterson helped him understand otherwise. Recognizing when you need help and arranging appropriate care is the definition of good parenting, she assured him. You're not giving up your role. You're strengthening it by ensuring Lily has everything she needs while you heal. Slowly, day by day, I began to see glimpses of the son I remembered. Thomas started helping with household tasks, first with hesitation, then with increasing confidence. He spent hours with Lily, reading to her, helping her draw pictures, rebuilding their bond in the safety of stable surroundings. His counseling sessions were intense and often left him emotionally drained, but I could see the progress as he gradually reclaimed his sense of self. The turning point came on a warm Saturday about a month after I'd found them under the bridge. I was gardening in the backyard while Thomas and Lily played a simple game of catch with a soft ball. Lily threw the ball wildly, and it landed in a flower bed. When she ran to retrieve it, she found a tiny frog hiding among the plants and squealed with delight. "Daddy, look, a froggy." Thomas knelt beside her, showing her how to observe without frightening the little creature. They watched it together, heads bent close. And then Thomas looked up at Lily and smiled a genuine, unguarded smile that reached his eyes for the first time since they'd come home. It was a small moment, but seeing that smile felt like witnessing a miracle. That night, after Lily was asleep, Thomas joined me on the patio. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching fireflies appear in the gathering dusk. "I've been thinking about what happens next," he finally said. "What do you want to happen?" I asked carefully. "I want justice," he said simply. "Not just for me, but for Lily. Audrey abandoned her daughter, left her to live under a bridge while she partied across the world. That can't go unpunished." I nodded, relieved that Thomas had reached this conclusion on his own. "Martin and Rebecca have been building a case. They believe we have grounds for criminal charges of fraud, identity theft, and child endangerment. But it would mean going public with everything that happened." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. The thought of everyone knowing how completely I was fooled, how I failed to protect Lily from her own mother. It's humiliating, but letting Audrey get away with it would be worse. You didn't fail, Thomas, I said firmly. You were victimized by someone who made deception her life's work. And despite everything she did to break you, you kept Lily safe, loved, and as provided for as you possibly could under impossible circumstances. He nodded slowly. I'll talk to Rebecca tomorrow. I want to know all our options. The meeting with Rebecca was comprehensive. She laid out several possible approaches, from purely civil action to pursue financial recovery, to criminal charges that could result in extradition and imprisonment for Audrey. The strongest case combines both, Rebecca advised. Civil action for the financial fraud and theft, criminal charges for the abandonment and child endangerment. But I want to be very clear. This will be public. There will be media attention. Are you prepared for that? Thomas hesitated, then squared his shoulders. If that's what it takes to protect Lily from Audrey ever returning to harm her again, then yes. Rebecca nodded approvingly. There's one more thing to consider. Right now, Audrey doesn't know we're building a case. She's comfortable, confident she's escaped any consequences. That works to our advantage. We can gather evidence, strengthen our position, before she realizes what's happening. This strategy made sense, and we agreed to proceed quietly for the moment. Thomas would focus on his recovery and rebuilding his relationship with Lily, while Rebecca, Martin, and I worked behind the scenes to construct an airtight case. Throughout this period, I monitored Audrey's social media activity daily. Her posts became increasingly extravagant: designer shopping sprees, exclusive parties, beach vacations at luxury resorts. There was never any mention of the daughter she had abandoned, no sign of concern for the husband she had left destitute. Her complete lack of remorse fueled my determination to see justice served. One evening, while reviewing Audrey's latest posts with Martin, I noticed something concerning. Look at this, I said, pointing to a comment beneath a photo of Audrey at a Sydney nightclub. She's been communicating with someone named Jessica Blackwood. Is that a relative? Martin quickly ran the name through his database. It's her sister. Younger by 2 years, seems to have stayed out of the family business until now. No criminal record, works as a dental hygienist in Portland. I felt a chill. Why would she suddenly be in contact with Audrey's sister? Let me look into their communications, Martin said, his expression worried. If Audrey is activating family connections here in the States, she might be planning something. That night, I checked on Thomas and Lily one extra time before bed. They were both sleeping peacefully, Lily clutching the new teddy bear Thomas had bought her during their first outing to the mall. Thomas with one hand protectively resting on her small shoulder even in sleep. Looking at them, I renewed my silent vow. Audrey had taken almost everything from them once. I would die before I let her hurt them again. The unexpected knock on my front door came on a Tuesday afternoon while Thomas was at therapy and I was helping Lily build a tower of blocks in the living room. Through the peephole, I saw a young woman with auburn hair pulled into a neat ponytail, dressed in jeans and a simple blue blouse. She looked vaguely familiar, though I couldn't immediately place her. "Can I help you?" I asked through the door, instinctively pulling Lily closer to me. "Mrs. Reynolds? I'm Jessica Blackwood, Audrey's sister." Her voice was soft, hesitant. I was hoping we could talk. I felt a surge of protectiveness, followed immediately by curiosity. This could be an opportunity to learn more about Audrey's background, her plans. I opened the door slightly, keeping Lily behind me. "How did you find us?" Jessica looked down, seemingly embarrassed. "I've known your address since Thomas and Audrey's wedding. I wasn't invited, Audrey, and I weren't speaking then, but I wanted to send a gift." She hesitated, then added, "I know what my sister did. That's why I'm here." Against my better judgment, but seeing a potential source of valuable information, I invited her in. Lily peered curiously at the visitor from behind my legs. "Is that Lily?" Jessica asked softly, kneeling to the child's eye level. "Hello there. You probably don't remember me, but I met you when you were just a tiny baby." Lily regarded her solemnly, then asked with the directness of childhood, "Are you a bad person like Mommy?" Jessica's face flushed, and tears sprang to her eyes. "No, honey. I'm here because I'm worried about you and your daddy. What my sister did was very wrong." Over coffee, while Lily returned to her blocks under my watchful eye, Jessica explained that she had been estranged from Audrey for years, aware of her sister's manipulative nature but unaware of the extent of her crimes. "I got a call from our Aunt Barbara last week," she explained. "She told me everything about Thomas and Lily being homeless, about the stolen money. I couldn't believe Audrey would go that far. But then again, she's always been capable of shocking me." Jessica seemed genuinely distressed, offering information about Audrey's past, her patterns of behavior, even details about accounts she might have used to hide money. She asked thoughtful questions about Thomas and Lily's well-being, expressing horror at what they had endured. "I want to help," she insisted. "I know it won't make up for what Audrey did, but maybe my testimony about her past could strengthen your case." I was cautiously optimistic. Jessica seemed sincere, and her inside knowledge could indeed be valuable. When Thomas returned home and met her, he was initially wary, but gradually warmed to her obvious concern. Over the next 2 weeks, Jessica became a regular visitor. She brought small gifts for Lily, coloring books, hair ribbons, a stuffed dolphin that quickly became a favorite. She helped Thomas prepare a resume for when he was ready to job hunt again. She even accompanied me to meetings with Martin and Rebecca, providing insights into Audrey's methods and mindset. Lily, especially, grew attached to her aunt. Jessica had a natural way with children, patient and attentive. She would spend hours playing with Lily, teaching her songs, helping her draw pictures. "She's so much like you, Thomas," she would say. "She has your kindness, your creativity." These comments visibly strengthened Thomas, affirming his connection to his daughter and distancing both of them from Audrey's influence. I began to see Jessica as an unexpected ally in our healing process, a biological link to Audrey who had chosen a different path. One afternoon, Jessica took Lily to the park with my blessing, Thomas having gone for a job interview at a marketing firm recommended by a former colleague. It was the first time Lily had been away from either Thomas or me since their rescue. But she went happily, holding her aunt's hand and chattering about the swings. When they returned, Lily was full of excitement about feeding ducks and making a new friend named Emma. Jessica showed me photos she'd taken on her phone, Lily on the slide, Lily throwing bread to ducks, Lily laughing with another little girl her age. It was heartwarming to see my granddaughter enjoying normal childhood pleasures after all she had been through. "I hope you don't mind, but I took a few videos too," Jessica said, scrolling through her phone. "She's such a character, the way she talks to the ducks was priceless." I thought nothing of it at the time, grateful for Lily's happiness and the normalcy of the outing. Jessica stayed for dinner, helping Thomas set the table while I finished cooking. The four of us settling into what felt almost like a new family unit. It was Martin who first raised the alarm, calling me late that night after Jessica had gone home. "Katherine, I've been monitoring Audrey's communications as we discussed. There's something you need to see." He sent me screenshots of private messages between Audrey and Jessica, dozens of them, spanning the past month. The earliest were clearly instructions from Audrey. "Find out what they're planning. Get close to the kid. Take pictures if you can." Later messages showed Jessica reporting back details about our legal strategy, Thomas's recovery progress, even the layout of my home. The most recent, sent just hours ago, included the videos and photos from the park outing, along with Jessica's assessment. "The kid is totally fine, healthy and happy, no signs of trauma or neglect. Perfect for our narrative." Audrey's response chilled me to the bone. "Excellent work, sis. These are exactly what we need. My lawyer says, with these plus your testimony about Thomas's unstable behavior and paranoid accusations, we can file for emergency custody next month. I'll be back in the States by then. Time to get my daughter back and make them pay for turning my own family against me." I sat frozen, staring at my phone, the betrayal hitting me like a physical blow. Jessica hadn't come to help us. She had been Audrey's spy all along, gathering intelligence, building trust only to help her sister launch a custody battle. The gifts, the kindness, the apparent concern, all an act, designed to position herself as a credible witness against Thomas. Worse, she had been documenting Lily's recovery as evidence that Thomas and I had exaggerated the abandonment, using the child's current well-being to suggest she had never really been in danger. The very improvement in Lily's condition that we had worked so hard to achieve was being weaponized against us. The next morning, I waited until Thomas took Lily upstairs for her bath before sharing Martin's discovery with him. His face went ashen as he read the messages. "I trusted her," he whispered. "I let her get close to Lily. I told her things about how I felt, about the nightmares, the panic attacks. She'll twist everything. This changes our timeline," I said firmly, pushing down my own sense of betrayal to focus on strategy. "Rebecca needs to know immediately. We can't wait any longer to file our case." Thomas nodded, then suddenly looked panicked. "Jessica is supposed to take Lily to the Children's Museum tomorrow. She said it would give me time to prepare for my second interview." I immediately called Jessica, making an excuse about Lily developing a slight fever and needing to cancel the museum trip. Her concerned questions about Lily's health now seemed sinister, calculating. Was she assessing whether this was a real illness, or if we had somehow discovered her deception? Later that day, Jessica arrived unannounced, bearing children's cold medicine and a get-well card for Lily. "I was so worried when you called," she said, her expression a perfect mask of concern. "I thought I'd drop these off to help." "That's very thoughtful," I said, maintaining my composure while inwardly recoiling at her duplicity. "Lily's resting now, but I'll tell her you stopped by." Jessica tilted her head, studying me. "Is everything okay, Katherine?" "You seem tense." "Just worried about Lily," I lied smoothly. "And Thomas has his interview tomorrow. It's a stressful time." She nodded sympathetically. "I understand. Please let me know if there's anything else I can do." As I closed the door behind her, I felt a chill of certainty she knew we had discovered her betrayal. The carefully neutral expression in her eyes, the way she had assessed my demeanor. She was reporting back to Audrey at this very moment. I called Rebecca and Martin immediately, summoning them to my home for an emergency meeting. Thomas and I sat at my dining room table as Rebecca laid out our new reality. Audrey is planning to return and file for custody. With Jessica's testimony and the documentation they've gathered, they could potentially create enough doubt about Thomas's stability to get an emergency hearing. "But the facts are on our side," I protested. "We have evidence of the financial theft, the abandonment." Rebecca nodded grimly. "Facts matter. But so does narrative. They're going to paint Thomas as mentally unstable, claim Audrey left temporarily for work with his knowledge, and suggest he spiraled into paranoid delusions that led to homelessness. Jessica will testify that Lily was always well cared for, using her current recovery as proof that the situation was never as dire as we claimed." Thomas slammed his hand on the table, startling us all. "I will not let them take my daughter. I will not let them make me out to be crazy when Audrey is the one who destroyed our lives." His vehemence was startling and heartening. This was not the broken man I had found beneath the bridge. This was a father ready to fight for his child. Rebecca's expression softened. "We won't let that happen, Thomas. But we need to move now. Before they do. We file tomorrow custody, divorce, criminal charges, everything at once. We control the narrative from here on out." As Rebecca and Martin left to prepare the filings, Thomas and I checked on Lily, sleeping peacefully in her room, unaware of the storm gathering around her. Jessica's betrayal had shaken us deeply, but it had also crystallized our resolve. "No more waiting," Thomas said quietly, looking down at his daughter. "No more hiding. Audrey thinks I'm still the broken man she left behind. She has no idea who she's dealing with now." I squeezed his shoulder, pride swelling in my heart. "She's about to find out." The next morning brought a flurry of activity as our counterattack against Audrey and Jessica began in earnest. Rebecca arrived early with a team of paralegals, turning my dining room into an impromptu war room. Martin set up surveillance equipment to monitor the house, concerned that Jessica might attempt to contact Lily directly or even try to take her now that her cover was blown. "We have a narrow window to act before they realize we're onto them," Rebecca explained, spreading documents across the table. "Once these are filed, everything changes." The legal strategy was comprehensive. First, Thomas would file for divorce on grounds of abandonment and financial abuse, with detailed documentation of Audrey's systematic theft and desertion. Simultaneously, we would petition for permanent sole custody of Lily, citing Audrey's abandonment of her child to homelessness while she enjoyed a luxury lifestyle abroad. On the criminal front, we were filing charges of grand theft, identity fraud, and child endangerment. Rebecca had coordinated with the district attorney's office, which had agreed to pursue the case based on the evidence Martin had gathered. The financial forensics are particularly damning, Rebecca noted, pointing to a thick binder of bank statements, transfer records, and forged documents. We've traced over $900,000 that Audrey systematically siphoned from Thomas's accounts and trust fund. The bank's internal investigation confirms that her cousin, Ryan Matthews, helped her bypass security protocols. He's already been terminated and is facing his own criminal charges. Thomas sat quietly through these explanations, occasionally asking pointed questions that showed he was fully engaged in the process. Gone was the shame and hesitation that had initially characterized his response to Audrey's betrayal. In its place was a calm, focused determination. While the legal preparations continued downstairs, I helped Lily with her morning routine, trying to maintain as much normalcy as possible. She noticed the unusual activity in the house. Of course, children always do, but seemed reassured when I explained that we were working on grown-up paperwork to make sure she could stay with Daddy forever. "Is Aunt Jessica coming today?" she asked as I helped her choose an outfit. My heart clenched at the innocent question. "No, sweetheart, Aunt Jessica won't be visiting anymore." Lily's little brow furrowed. "Did she do something bad like Mommy?" I sat beside her on the bed, choosing my words carefully. "Yes, she did. She wasn't honest with us. But you don't need to worry about that. Daddy and Grandma are taking care of everything." She nodded solemnly, then asked in a small voice, "Is Mommy coming back to take me away?" The fear in her eyes broke my heart. Even at 4 years old, Lily had absorbed the tension in our household, sensed the threat hovering over her young life. I pulled her into a gentle hug. "No, Lily. Nobody is taking you away from Daddy or me. That's exactly what all this paperwork is for, to make sure you stay right here where you belong." By midday, the first wave of legal filings was complete. Rebecca departed for the courthouse with her team, while Martin remained to coordinate with the private security firm we had hired to protect the house. Thomas, finally alone with me in the kitchen while Lily napped upstairs, let out a long breath. "It feels real now," he said quietly. "There's no going back." "Are you having second thoughts?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He shook his head firmly. "Not about fighting back. I just never imagined my life would come to this, hiding in my childhood home, hiring security guards, filing criminal charges against the mother of my child." His expression hardened. "But Audrey made her choice. Now she deals with the consequences." That evening, Rebecca called with confirmation that all our filings had been processed. The district attorney had issued an arrest warrant for Audrey on multiple felony counts. International law enforcement had been notified, and the process of freezing her Australian assets had begun. "What about Jessica?" Thomas asked. "No charges yet," Rebecca replied. "But we've filed for a restraining order keeping her away from both you and Lily. A judge granted it temporarily, pending a hearing next week." While these developments were encouraging, Martin cautioned that Audrey's return to the U.S. was still a significant concern. "She'll know something's wrong when Jessica stops getting access to Lily," he pointed out. "If she's planning to come back soon anyway, she might accelerate her timeline." This possibility required additional preparation. Rebecca worked with Thomas to document every aspect of his parenting and recovery, creating a paper trail that would counteract any claims Audrey might make about his fitness as a father. Lily's pediatrician and therapist provided statements about her progress under Thomas's care, emphasizing the stability and love in their current living situation. I leveraged my own connections in the community, discreetly reaching out to friends who worked in media, the school system, and social services. If Audrey attempted to paint herself as the victim in this situation, we would need allies ready to counter that narrative. The most innovative aspect of our strategy came from Martin, who suggested we use Audrey's predictable greed against her. "She thinks she's outsmarted everyone," he explained. "But her weakness is her overconfidence and her greed." His plan was elegant in its simplicity. We would create a situation that Audrey couldn't resist, one that would lure her back to the U.S. on our terms, rather than hers. With my permission, Martin planted a story with a financial reporter about my estate planning. The article, which would appear in a local business journal but be findable online, suggested I was transferring significant assets to Thomas and Lily, consolidating family holdings in preparation for retirement. Audrey will see this as an opportunity, Martin explained. New money she can target, potentially outside the accounts she's already drained. She won't be able to resist. To ensure the bait reached its target, we monitored Jessica's phone and email, waiting for the inevitable contact from Audrey. It came 3 days after our legal filings, a frantic message demanding updates and expressing concern about Jessica's sudden lack of access to Lily. With Thomas's consent, Martin intercepted Jessica's reply, sending instead a carefully crafted message mentioning the news article about my estate planning. They're distracted with all this financial stuff. The message read, Katherine is transferring everything to Thomas. Millions, from what I overheard. They're meeting with banks all week. Audrey's response was immediate and revealing. Find out which banks, when the transfers happen. This changes everything. I'm booking a flight back next week. Don't tell them anything about my return. Martin showed us the exchange with grim satisfaction. She took the bait. Now we prepare for her arrival. The knowledge that Audrey was planning to return sent Thomas into a renewed period of anxiety. Despite his determination to fight, the prospect of facing her again triggered his trauma responses. Dr. Peterson adjusted his therapy schedule, providing additional sessions to help him prepare emotionally for the confrontation ahead. Remember that you are not the same person Audrey left behind, Dr. Peterson reminded him. You've done the work. You understand her tactics now. You have support, evidence, and the truth on your side. I watched my son absorb these words, straightening his shoulders almost imperceptibly. The broken man I had found beneath the bridge was transforming before my eyes into a warrior not through aggression or vengeance, but through the quiet strength that comes from surviving the worst and choosing to stand up again. As we waited for Audrey's return, we reinforced our protective measures around Lily. Her preschool was notified not to release her to anyone but Thomas or me. Security cameras were installed at my home. Lily's routines were adjusted to keep her close, though we worked hard to ensure she didn't feel frightened or restricted. One evening, as I tucked Lily into bed, she asked a question that caught me off guard. Grandma, why did Mommy and Aunt Jessica tell lies? I sat beside her, stroking her hair as I considered how to answer truthfully without burdening her young mind. Some people think only about what they want, sweetheart, not about how their actions hurt others. Your Mommy and Aunt Jessica made bad choices because they were thinking only of themselves. Lily was quiet for a moment, her face serious beyond her years. Then she said, Daddy doesn't tell lies. He promised we'd never sleep under the bridge again, and we haven't. Tears sprang to my eyes at the simple truth in her words. That's right, Lily. Daddy keeps his promises. And so do I. We promise to keep you safe and loved. Always. As she drifted off to sleep, I remained beside her, overwhelmed by the fierce protectiveness I felt. Audrey had no idea what she was up against. She thought she was returning to intimidate a broken man and reclaim control over a valuable asset, her daughter. Instead, she would face a united family prepared to fight with every legal and moral advantage on our side. The trap was set. Now we waited for Audrey to spring it herself. The notification came on a crisp Tuesday morning. Audrey's flight from Sydney would land at 3:42 p.m. Martin's contacts at immigration had flagged her passport, allowing us to track her return without alerting her to our knowledge. I called Rebecca immediately, setting our carefully orchestrated plan into motion. She's arriving today, I said when Thomas came downstairs, having just settled Lily with her breakfast. He paused, his hand gripping the back of a kitchen chair so tightly his knuckles whitened. Then he took a deep breath, released his grip, and nodded. Good. Let's end this. We had discussed whether Thomas should be present for Audrey's arrival, weighing the emotional impact against the strategic advantage of surprising her with his transformed presence. Ultimately, Thomas had decided to face her directly. She thinks I'm still hiding in shame, he'd explained. I want her to see exactly who she's up against now. Rebecca arrived mid-morning with final preparations. Martin coordinated with law enforcement, ensuring officers would be positioned discreetly at the airport. Our goal wasn't to create a public spectacle with an airport arrest that would be traumatic for all involved, particularly if news cameras captured it. Instead, we had arranged for Audrey to be served with legal papers immediately upon clearing customs, then quietly detained by police if she reacted badly. Thomas spent an hour with Dr. Peterson, using techniques they had practiced to remain centered during the confrontation. I arranged for Lily to have a special playdate with her new friend Emma, under the watchful eye of Emma's mother, a former police officer who understood the sensitivity of our situation. Lily didn't need to witness the day's events. At 3:15, we received confirmation that Audrey's flight had landed. By 3:50, she had cleared customs and been served with the divorce papers, custody filing, and restraining orders. By 4:05, she had been informed of the criminal charges against her but not taken into custody, as we had requested. She was permitted to leave the airport following the script we had anticipated. "She's on her way," Martin confirmed via text. "Took a taxi, heading to your address as expected." Thomas and I waited in my living room. Rebecca beside us. Private security positioned discreetly around the property. The atmosphere was tense but focused, like the calm center of a gathering storm. At 4:42 p.m., a taxi pulled up outside my house. Through the window, I watched Audrey step out, looking exactly as she had in her Instagram posts, tanned, expensively dressed, hair perfectly styled. She paid the driver and walked confidently up the path to my front door, a designer handbag swinging from her arm, as if she were arriving for a casual family visit rather than walking into a legal ambush. The doorbell rang. Thomas and I exchanged a look, then he nodded. I opened the door. Audrey's smile faltered slightly when she saw me, but she recovered quickly. "Katherine, hello. I was hoping to find Thomas and Lily here. Are they around?" Her tone was casual, almost cheerful, as if she hadn't abandoned her family to homelessness 6 months earlier. "They're here," I replied coolly, making no move to invite her in. "I believe you received some paperwork at the airport." Her expression hardened slightly. "There seems to be some confusion. I'm here to clear things up. May I come in?" "That depends. Are you planning to explain why you left your husband and daughter to live under a bridge while you vacationed in Australia?" Audrey's face registered genuine shock, quickly masked. "Under a bridge? What are you talking about?" Thomas agreed to our separation. "I've been working in Australia, sending money when I could. If they've been having housing issues, that's the first I've heard of it." She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a confidential tone. "Katherine, I'm worried about Thomas. Has he been telling you these stories?" His behavior became increasingly erratic before I left. That's partly why I needed some space. It was a masterful performance concern, confusion, the subtle suggestion that Thomas was mentally unstable. I might even have believed her, had I not seen my son and granddaughter huddled in filth and hunger beneath that overpass. "You should speak to Thomas directly," I said, stepping aside to allow her entry. "He's been looking forward to seeing you." She hesitated fractionally before stepping inside, her eyes darting around, assessing the situation. When she saw Thomas standing in the living room, her expression cycled rapidly through surprise, calculation, and finally settled on warmth. "Thomas! There you are." She moved toward him as if to embrace him, but stopped when he took a step back. "What's going on? Why am I being served all these papers? And where's Lily?" Thomas's voice was steady, controlled. "Lily is safe, which is more than I can say for when you abandoned us after emptying our bank accounts." "Abandoned?" Audrey's eyes widened in practiced disbelief. "I went to Australia for work. We discussed this. I've been supporting you as best I could. If there have been financial problems, it's because you lost your job, not because of anything I did." "We have the bank records, Audrey," Thomas said quietly. "Every transfer, every withdrawal. We have the forged documents you and your cousin used to access my trust fund. We have the rental agreement for your Sydney apartment paid 6 months in advance while we were being evicted." Audrey's mask slipped for just an instant, a flash of calculation crossing her features. Then she changed tactics, her eyes filling with tears. "Thomas, whatever you think happened, I can explain. I made some mistakes, yes, but I never meant to hurt you or Lily. I was under so much pressure. If you'll just listen." "We found your other husbands," I interrupted, unwilling to let her manipulation continue. "David Porter in Seattle. Michael Brennan in Chicago. both financially drained and abandoned. Just like Thomas, the tears vanished instantly. Audrey's expression hardened, her posture shifting subtly. I see Jessica has been talking. She always was jealous of me. Making up stories. Jessica has been working with you the entire time, Thomas countered. We have your messages, Audrey. The entire plan to spy on us, to build a custody case based on lies. For the first time, genuine surprise and concern showed on Audrey's face. Her eyes darted toward the door, but she must have noticed the security personnel visible through the window. What do you want? She asked coldly, dropping all pretense. Rebecca stepped forward, introducing herself as Thomas's attorney. Mr. Reynolds is willing to negotiate terms that might mitigate some of the criminal charges you're facing. Full financial disclosure, return of stolen assets, and voluntary termination of parental rights would be a start. Audrey laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. Termination of parental rights? You think I'd give up my own daughter? The courts favor mothers, as you well know. Once I explain how Thomas's mental health issues led to their homelessness, how he's been keeping Lily from me, turning her against me, we have documentation of your abandonment. Rebecca countered smoothly. Bank records, eviction notices, medical reports detailing Lily's condition when she was found. We have testimony from witnesses who saw them living under the bridge. We have your own social media posts flaunting your luxury lifestyle while they suffered. It would be your word against mine, Audrey insisted, though less confidently. And the word of the district attorney, Rebecca added. The arrest warrant has already been issued. Miss Blackwood, or should I say, Miss Reynolds, though that's not your legal name either, is it? The only reason you weren't taken into custody at the airport is because we requested a brief delay to allow this conversation. Audrey's composure cracked entirely. You can't prove anything. Those bank transfers were authorized. Thomas gave me permission to use that money. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Actually, we do, Thomas said, his voice stronger now. We know exactly who you are, what you've done, and what you're capable of. That's why Lily is somewhere safe, somewhere you will never find her. At the mention of Lily, Audrey's expression changed again. Calculation replacing anger. I want to see my daughter. I have rights. You lost those rights when you left her to starve under a bridge, Thomas replied, an edge of steel in his voice that I had never heard before. The police are waiting outside, Audrey. You have two choices. You can cooperate with us, return what you stole, and face reduced charges. Or you can fight, lose everything, and spend the next decade in prison. For a moment, the room was silent as Audrey assessed her options. I could almost see her mind working, looking for a way out, an angle she hadn't considered. Finally, she reached for her handbag. I need to make a call. To whom? Rebecca asked. Jessica? She's being questioned by police as we speak, facing charges of conspiracy and evidence tampering. Audrey's face paled slightly. Her hand dropped from her bag. I want a lawyer. That's your right, Rebecca acknowledged. But consider carefully what you're fighting for. Miss Blackwood, the evidence against you is substantial. Your previous victims have agreed to testify. Your financial crimes cross state lines and international boundaries. This isn't a battle you can charm or manipulate your way out of. For the first time, Audrey looked directly at Thomas, really seeing him not as the controllable husband or the broken man she had left behind, but as the determined father who would do anything to protect his child. Something like uncertainty flickered in her eyes. You've changed, she said quietly. Thomas nodded. Yes. Thanks to you. I know exactly what I'm capable of enduring, and exactly what I'm willing to fight for. You showed me my worst moments, Audrey. You don't get to be part of our best ones. The confrontation culminated not with dramatic accusations or emotional breakdowns, but with the methodical process of justice. Audrey was escorted from my home by police officers, booked on initial charges of grand theft and fraud, with more charges pending. Her request for bail was denied due to flight risk. Jessica, facing lesser but still serious charges, quickly agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for leniency. The media coverage was inevitable. given the dramatic nature of the case and Audrey's previous victims coming forward. Rebecca's carefully prepared statements controlled the narrative, focusing on Thomas's courage and resilience rather than the details of his victimization. We protected Lily from the publicity, creating a bubble of normalcy around her while the legal process unfolded. The custody hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after Audrey's arrest. Despite the overwhelming evidence against her, she refused to voluntarily terminate her parental rights, forcing us into court. Thomas prepared diligently with Rebecca, gathering character witnesses, documenting his recovery and stability, and organizing evidence of his consistent care for Lily despite impossible circumstances. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was tense but controlled. Audrey appeared in clothing provided by her public defender, her previously immaculate appearance now subdued. She had opted to represent herself in the custody matter, a decision that concerned her own attorney, but played into our strategy. Rebecca had warned us that Audrey would likely attempt to charm the judge and paint herself as a victim of circumstances. The proceedings began with opening statements. Rebecca presented a clear, factual account of Audrey's abandonment and Thomas's subsequent efforts to care for Lily under dire conditions. When Audrey's turn came, she spun a tale of misunderstanding and persecution, claiming Thomas had become paranoid and controlling, forcing her to seek work abroad for their financial survival. "I love my daughter more than anything," she concluded, her voice breaking artfully. "I made mistakes, yes, but I never abandoned her. I was working to provide for her future." The judge, a seasoned family court veteran named Judge Eleanor Martinez, listened impassively to both sides before calling the first witness Thomas. Under Rebecca's careful questioning, Thomas recounted the gradual escalation of Audrey's financial and emotional abuse, his job loss, their eviction, and the desperate weeks living under the bridge with Lily. His testimony was powerful in its straightforward honesty, particularly when describing his efforts to shield Lily from the worst of their circumstances. "I would give her most of whatever food I could get," he explained, his voice steady despite the painful memories. "I read to her every night, using books from the public library. I tried to make it seem like an adventure, not a tragedy. I failed her in many ways, but I never stopped trying to protect her." When Audrey cross-examined him, her approach was immediately confrontational. "Isn't it true that you lost your job due to poor performance? That your increasing paranoia and erratic behavior made it impossible for you to maintain employment?" Thomas remained calm. "I lost my job after months of interference from you calls to my supervisor, alleging emergencies, scheduling conflicts you created intentionally, sleep deprivation from your deliberate disruptions." The company was understanding until it affected client relationships. Audrey's questioning grew increasingly aggressive as Thomas refused to be provoked. When she demanded to know why he hadn't sought help from family or friends, his answer silenced the courtroom. "I was ashamed," he said simply. "You spent years convincing me that I was worthless, incompetent, undeserving of help. I believed I had failed as a husband, a father, a man. That shame kept me isolated exactly as you intended." The turning point came when Lily's therapist testified about the child's recovery and her descriptions of life under the bridge. Dr. Santos recounted how Lily had initially been reluctant to sleep in a bed, preferring to curl up with her father on the floor where she felt safer. "She told me her daddy was the best pillow because he would stay awake all night to watch for bad people while she slept," Dr. Santos testified. She has consistent memories of her mother leaving and never calling or visiting, which she interpreted as punishment for some imagined misbehavior on her part. Audrey's cross-examination of Dr. Santos quickly went badly for her. When she suggested the therapist was biased toward fathers, Dr. Santos calmly cited her 30 years of practice and over 2,000 cases working with children from all family structures. When Audrey claimed Lily's memories must have been influenced by Thomas, Dr. Santos explained the protocols used to prevent parental coaching in therapy sessions. By the time Audrey took the stand herself, the judge's patience was visibly wearing thin. Audrey's testimony was a masterclass in manipulation, tears, righteous indignation, and repeated assertions of maternal love, but it crumbled under Rebecca's methodical cross-examination. "Miss Blackwood, Can you explain these bank transfers moving over $900,000 from your husband's accounts to your private accounts in Australia? Thomas authorized those transfers for our future together. Rebecca produced documentation showing Thomas's signature had been forged. Audrey claimed ignorance. Can you explain why, if you were working to support your family, your social media shows daily shopping sprees, yacht parties, and luxury resort stays while your husband and daughter were homeless? Those posts were professional networking. The lifestyle was an illusion to attract clients, Audrey insisted. And these text messages to your sister, instructing her to spy on your daughter and gather evidence against your husband? Jessica misunderstood my intentions. I was worried about Lily's welfare. With each question, Audrey's credibility diminished. Her mask began to slip, frustration replacing practiced sympathy. The breaking point came when Rebecca asked about her previous marriages and financial frauds. Those allegations are completely false, Audrey declared hotly. Your Honor, we call David Porter as our next witness, Rebecca responded calmly. Audrey's face drained of color. When her first husband took the stand and described how she had systematically isolated and defrauded him using exactly the same methods she had employed with Thomas, her composure shattered completely. He's lying, she shouted, rising from her seat. They're all lying. Thomas was unstable. Not me. I deserve my daughter. Miss Blackwood, control yourself, or you will be removed from my courtroom, Judge Martinez warned. Audrey's response was a fatal mistake. My name is not Blackwood. I am Audrey Reynolds, and that man stole my life, my money, my daughter. The outburst confirmed everything we had presented about Audrey's true nature. The judge called a brief recess, during which Audrey's criminal attorney urged her to reconsider fighting the custody case given the damage she had done to her position. When court resumed, Judge Martinez delivered her ruling with measured firmness. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, I find overwhelming proof of abandonment, financial abuse, and ongoing risk to the minor child. Sole legal and physical custody is awarded to Thomas Reynolds, with no visitation rights for Audrey Blackwood at this time. She fixed Audrey with a stern gaze. Miss Blackwood, your actions toward your child and her father represent one of the most disturbing cases of familial abandonment I have encountered in my 20 years on the bench. The court strongly recommends you accept whatever plea arrangement the district attorney offers in your criminal case, as a trial would likely result in maximum sentencing given the evidence presented here today. Audrey's final attempt to approach Thomas after the hearing was intercepted by security personnel. As she was led away, she called out desperately, "This isn't over, Thomas. You can't keep my daughter from me forever." Thomas watched her go, not with hatred or even anger, but with a calm certainty that reflected his hard-won peace. "Actually," he said quietly, though she couldn't hear him, "it is over. You made sure of that yourself." Outside the courthouse, away from media cameras, Thomas finally allowed himself a moment of vulnerability, leaning against a wall and taking deep, steadying breaths. I stood beside him, my hand on his shoulder, feeling the tension gradually leave his body. "Let's go home," he said finally. "Lily will be waiting." As we drove back to my house, where Emma's mother had brought Lily after their playdate, Thomas looked out at the city, passing by the same city where he had once huddled with his daughter under a bridge, unseen and forgotten. "I want to buy a house," he said suddenly. "Something with a yard for Lily, not too far from you. Somewhere we can start fresh." I smiled, hearing in those simple words all the healing and hope that had seemed impossible just months before. "I think that's a wonderful idea." 1 year later, I stood in the backyard of Thomas's new home, watching through the kitchen window as he helped Lily frost cupcakes for her 5th birthday party. Sunlight streamed through the glass, illuminating their matching expressions of concentration as they carefully applied sprinkles to each tiny cake. So much had changed in 12 months. Thomas's new house was modest but perfect for their needs, a 3-bedroom craftsman with a fenced backyard and a tire swing hanging from a sturdy oak tree. Located just 10 minutes from my home, it represented Thomas's hard-won independence and his commitment to creating a stable environment for Lily. The legal aftermath of Audrey's crimes had unfolded largely as Rebecca predicted. Faced with overwhelming evidence and testimony from previous victims, Audrey had eventually accepted a plea deal on the criminal charges. She was currently serving an 8-year sentence for fraud, theft, and child endangerment, with additional time likely for parole violations after a failed escape attempt during a medical appointment. Jessica had received a suspended sentence and probation in exchange for her testimony against Audrey. She had made one attempt to contact Thomas with a lengthy email of explanation and apology, which he had read but not answered. Some betrayals, we had learned, did not require forgiveness to move beyond them. Thomas had secured a position at a marketing firm owned by a college friend who had reached out after learning of his situation. His recovery had continued steadily, with fewer therapy sessions needed as time passed, though both he and Lily still met with Dr. Peterson monthly for check-ins. Lily had blossomed in their new home. The frightened, malnourished child from beneath the bridge was now a confident kindergartner with friends, hobbies, and the normal concerns of a 5-year-old. She rarely mentioned Audrey anymore, though occasionally she would ask Thomas questions about why some of her friends had mommies and she didn't. Thomas had been remarkably thoughtful about how to address these questions. With guidance from Dr. Peterson, he had developed age-appropriate explanations that acknowledged Audrey's existence without dwelling on her crimes. "Your mommy made some bad choices that meant she couldn't take care of you," he would explain gently. "Sometimes grown-ups have problems that keep them from being good parents, but you have daddy and grandma and lots of people who love you very much." This seemed to satisfy Lily for now, though we all understood there would be more complex conversations in the future as she grew older and could better understand what had happened. The financial aspects of their ordeal had been partially resolved through civil judgments against Audrey and her accomplices. While we had recovered only about 40% of the stolen funds, Thomas had made peace with the loss, focusing instead on rebuilding his career and providing for Lily's future. I had worked with a financial advisor to establish a new trust for Lily's education, one with significantly more protections than Thomas's original trust. Thomas had initially been reluctant to accept this help, still healing from the shame of his financial victimization, but had ultimately recognized it as an act of love rather than charity. Thomas's personal life had begun to include more than just work and parenting. 6 months ago, he had started dating again cautiously, selectively. Sarah was a kindergarten teacher at Lily's school, a divorced mother of a son Lily's age. Their relationship was progressing slowly, built on honesty and mutual respect. Thomas was careful to keep appropriate boundaries between his dating life and Lily's routine, but the possibility of a blended family someday seemed increasingly likely. My own life had changed as well. After witnessing the devastating impact of financial abuse on Thomas and other victims, I had begun volunteering with a nonprofit organization that provided support and resources to people escaping financially abusive relationships. My experience helping Thomas navigate the legal and emotional aftermath of Audrey's crimes had given me insights that proved valuable to others in similar situations. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reflections. Through the window, I watched Thomas wipe his hands on a towel and head toward the front door. Lily's birthday guests would be arriving soon, classmates, neighbors, new friends who knew nothing of the bridge or the betrayals that had preceded this happy day. I joined Thomas and Lily inside, helping to arrange the cupcakes on a colorful tray while Lily danced around the kitchen in her party dress, bubbling with excitement. Thomas caught my eye over her head and smiled a genuine, unguarded smile that reached his eyes and erased, for a moment, all traces of past trauma. Later, after the chaotic joy of the children's party had subsided and Lily was tucked into bed surrounded by new toys, Thomas and I sat on his back porch with cups of coffee, enjoying the peaceful evening. "Do you ever think about her?" I asked quietly. Thomas didn't need to ask who I meant. "Not often anymore," he admitted. "Sometimes I still wake up in a panic, thinking we're back under that bridge. But those nights are getting rarer." He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the yard where Lily's new bicycle leaned against the fence. "The strangest thing is, I'm actually grateful in a way." I raised an eyebrow in question. "Not for what she did," he clarified, "but for what I learned from surviving it. I know now that I'm stronger than I ever thought possible. I know what really matters, and it's not money or status or keeping up appearances. It's this." He gestured to the house around us. "Security. Honesty. Love that doesn't come with conditions." His words resonated deeply with me. Through all the pain and struggle, Thomas had emerged not just recovering, but transformed. The uncertain young man who had once sought validation through a destructive marriage had become a confident father grounded in authentic values. "You know," I said, "your father would be incredibly proud of you, not just for rebuilding your life, but for the kind of father you've become to Lily." Thomas smiled, his eyes suspiciously bright in the fading light. "I think about him a lot these days, especially when Lily asks me questions I don't know how to answer. I find myself wondering what Dad would have done." "You're doing fine on your own," I assured him. "More than fine." As the stars emerged in the darkening sky, I thought about the journey we had taken from that terrible day beneath the bridge to this peaceful evening. The path had not been easy or straight. There had been setbacks, moments of doubt, and challenges we hadn't anticipated. But we had faced them together, our family bonds proving stronger than the betrayals that had tested them. In the end, what Audrey had failed to understand was that true strength isn't found in manipulating others or accumulating wealth at any cost. It's found in the ability to endure hardship without becoming hardened, to face betrayal without becoming bitter, to rebuild from nothing with dignity and hope. Thomas had shown that strength every day since I found him beneath that bridge, and Lily was learning it by his example. As I prepared to leave for the night, Thomas walked me to my car. "Thank you, Mom," he said simply, embracing me. "For everything." No words were needed beyond that. We both understood what those simple words encompassed: the search that had led me to the bridge, the home that had sheltered them in their darkest hours, the battle we had fought together for justice and healing. I drove home under the canopy of stars, grateful beyond measure that my son and granddaughter were safe, loved, and thriving. Their journey wasn't over. Life would bring new challenges, new joys, new chapters to their story. But the nightmare of the bridge was behind them now, replaced by the solid foundation of a home built on truth and resilience. And that, I reflected as I turned onto my street, is what family should truly be: not a facade of perfection, but a circle of love strong enough to weather even the fiercest storms. Thomas and Lily had found their way home, not just to a house with walls and a roof, but to themselves and to each other. In the end, that was the only victory that really mattered. If you've ever stood by someone during their darkest moments or fought to protect those you love, I hope this story has resonated with you. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to rebuild after betrayal? What gave you the strength to keep going? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and healing. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes our greatest strength is revealed in our most vulnerable moments.